3 months have passed since Israel declared a complete siege of Gaza after the October 7th attack by Hamas. Since then, the Enclave has weathered blanket bombings and an onslaught of military operations by the Israeli Defense Forces. While Israel has said that its goal is to destroy Hamas, Gaza continues to spiral under an unprecedented crisis. And what global humanitarian organizations have also called collective punishment. This is the face of Gaza's most recent tragedy. WION The World is an Al Jazeera Gaza bureau chief, but today he embodies the grief and devastation of the war-torn enclave. WION lost his eldest son, Hamza Dadu, to an Israeli airstrike in Khan Yunis on Sunday. Like his father, the 27-year-old was also a journalist and was traveling with 2 others near the Al-Mawasi when he was killed.
How can a person receive the news of the death of his son, his eldest son, and everything in his life? And after I lost before members of my family, my wife, my son Mahmoud, Sham and Adam.
In the course of these 3 months, WION lost his wife, daughter, and a second son and a grandchild. Hours after suffering a personal blow, he was back to reporting on the ground reality of Gaza.
The world should see with 2 eyes, not with an Israeli eye. They should see everything happening to the Palestinian people. What did Hamza do to them? To the Israelis? What did my family do to them? What did civilians do to them? They did nothing to them, but the world closes its eyes to what's happening in the Gaza Strip.
WION's story is a representation of what thousands of families in the war-torn enclave endure every single day. Since October 8th, 1.9 million Palestinians in Gaza have been displaced. Hunger, lack of electricity, and a meager influx of aid remains an everyday story. All of this while death and despair have become the new normal in Gaza. Pressure mounts on Israel's government to bring the remaining hostages home. Families of hostages kidnapped on October 7th by Hamas displayed a beeline of shoes calling on Israeli authorities to rescue the captives. Meanwhile, top Israeli officials said that they expect the war in Gaza to continue for at least a year. The statement raises concerns over rising civilian casualties in the enclave and a worsening humanitarian crisis. The remarks come in the backdrop of U.S. State Secretary Antony Blinken's West Asia visit that aims to deter the tensions from escalating into a full-blown regional war. The U.S. Secretary of State has now arrived in Saudi Arabia to hold talks with the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. And now for more on this, we are being joined by Daniel Levy from London. He is the president of the US Middle East Project and former senior advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister's office. Thank you so much for joining us here on WION.
Good to be with you, Ananya.
Now, this is Antony Blinken's 4th visit to Israel since the war began. Do you think the visits have been successful, not only in solving the conflict in Gaza, but also stopping it from spilling over?
I'm afraid that if I were offering a scorecard for Secretary of State Blinken, who of course does not stand alone, this is the president, this is the administration, he'd be getting a big fail from me. I think the Americans set out their stall. They set out a number of goals. One was to stand with Israel. This is the only one that gets a tick. The others, as you noted, were to prevent a possible regional conflagration. We are closer to that now than at any point. Huge problem. We already see what's happening. Yemen, Red Sea, Houthis, Iraqi and Syrian militias, and of course, Lebanon. Secondly, to prevent a humanitarian disaster and civilian casualties. That has been appalling by any standards. The number of dead Palestinian children, just unparalleled in recent conflict. Number three, we haven't had the Israelis being held in Gaza released. So I think across those different measures, the Americans have come up with a very poor result in terms of investment of effort.
Right. Mr. Levy, top Israeli officials are now saying that they expect the war in Gaza to continue for at least a year. How do you see the war ending?
Well, I do think the matter we just discussed, Anania, will be crucial, which is that America will need to lean in other ways if we're not going to have that nightmare scenario for a year. And I think as we enter winter in the Gaza Strip and the conditions Palestinians are living under, the kind of suffering is going to get worse exponentially. So I think it's going to be a combination of external pressure, perhaps internally Israelis getting sick of this going on. We're certainly not there yet. Perhaps seeing that the military mission is going nowhere. And then I draw our attention to one other important
Mr. Levy, you mentioned external pressure to be very critical to this. What kind of external pressure are you talking about? And do you think Israel would be on board with that?
Well, of course, when you're the party that is being pressured, you're not. It's not something you welcome. It's not something you encourage. The question is, can it impact Israel? And here I would draw attention to an action taken by the government of South Africa in the International Court of Justice under the Genocide Convention. It has asked for an urgent call by the court for Israel to honor its obligations under that convention and to desist from certain measures. And I think that will cause either additional problems for the US or give the US some leverage. So when I talk about pressure, yes, America, crucial, but it shouldn't just be America. I think there's an entire world out there which can lean into this more, as the South Africans have done, and I think as we may see others do. I'm not saying that there'll be this immediate causal effect that Israel will end the war, but then you might create the conditions where Israel feels there's a cost and consequence for continuing and therefore has to calibrate a new way.
All right, Mr. Levy, thank you so much for getting us all those insights.
My pleasure, Anania.